War movies often get accused of exaggerating, but here's the twist. Some of the wildest tales weren't made up at all. They were lifted straight from Britain's covert playbook, missions that sound like pulp fiction, but actually happened. Secret agents parachuting behind enemy lines, commandos paddling into hostile harbors, and ordinary soldiers pulling off escapes that Hollywood couldn't dream up. Which of these legendary stories made it onto the big screen? Let's dig into the daring 15. Ill met by moonlight, 1957. Kidnapping a German general from his own island fortress sounds like something out of a comic book. But in Crete, 1944, that's exactly what SOE officer Patrick Lee Firmer and his band of partisans pulled off, and Ill Met by Moonlight captures the madness. The film opens with a bold plan: abduct General Heinrich Kripe and smuggle him across rugged terrain while enemy patrols hunt them like bloodhounds. What makes this movie fascinating isn't just the drama of the chase, but the sheer British eccentricity behind it. Dirk Bogarde plays Fermor with cool detachment, leading his team through moonlit mountain passes where every shepherd might be a spy. The authenticity is heightened because the real Fermor consulted on the project, ensuring it wasn't just another stiff upper lip war yarn, but a portrayal of actual fieldcraft and nerve-shattering tension. And here's the kicker. The film doesn't shy from the audacity of it all. The plan worked. Kripe was spirited away, the German command embarrassed, and morale in occupied Crete surged. Critics called it implausible, yet it was one of the most documented success stories of British special ops. The movie might feel a little stagey today, but at its heart is a true reminder that Britain's war effort wasn't only about tanks and planes. It was also about a handful of men willing to risk everything with nothing more than cunning and courage. Odette, 1950. Imagine volunteering for a mission knowing you might not come back. That was Odette Sansom, a French-born housewife turned SOE agent whose life inspired one of Britain's most harrowing war films. Odette isn't a glossy adventure. It's a gut punch of realism, charting her undercover work in occupied France, her capture, and the brutal treatment she endured without ever betraying her comrades. Anna Neagle takes on the role with dignity and steel, capturing a woman who wasn't a trained fighter, but an ordinary person pushed into extraordinary circumstances. The film's power lies in its restraint. There's no romanticizing here. The camera lingers on the claustrophobia of safe houses, the coded radio messages, and the gnawing fear that every knock at the door could mean the end. The climax, showing Odette's imprisonment in Ravensbrück, is handled with stark sobriety. Audiences in 1950 weren't watching a fantasy, but a near documentary of courage under unimaginable strain. What's more, Odette herself was present at the premiere, living proof of the ordeal and resilience the film portrays. It was a box office success, not because it thrilled, but because it honored. This wasn't about heroes with medals. It was about the quiet, stubborn strength of a woman who stood unbroken. In an era when war films often leaned toward triumph, Odette gave viewers something rarer: the dignity of survival without compromise. Carve Her Name with Pride, 1958. Few films can match the emotional weight of Carve Her Name with Pride, the dramatization of Violette Szabo's life. If Odette showed survival, this one shows sacrifice. Played by Virginia McKenna, Szabo is introduced not as a hardened operative, but as a young widow, motivated by grief and duty to join the SOE. The story follows her training, her daring missions into occupied France, and ultimately, her capture. But what makes the film unforgettable is the way it balances the intimacy of Violette's personal life with the scope of her bourge. Dangerous assignments. Small details, a locket, a last letter, a coded poem, become symbols of her humanity in a brutal war. The film doesn't flinch from her end in Ravensbrück, yet it frames her execution not as defeat, but as testimony to resilience. Critics praised the way the movie walked the line between honoring her bravery and acknowledging the sheer cost. Released only 13 years after the events, audiences knew they weren't watching distant history, they were watching the story of someone who had lived among them. What lingers is the sense that Szabo wasn't extraordinary before the war. She became extraordinary because she chose to step into danger. That decision, captured with McKenna's heartfelt performance, turns the movie into both tribute and warning. Courage always carries a price. The Wooden Horse, 1950. Picture this: a gymnastics vaulting horse wheeled out daily into a German POW camp yard. Guards yawn, thinking it's just a fitness routine. What they don't realize is that every time the horse is moved, men inside are quietly digging a tunnel beneath it. That's the ingenious escape plan behind The Wooden Horse, a film that dramatizes one of the most creative POW breakouts of the war. Based on real events at Stalag Luft III, the same camp that later inspired The Great Escape, the film nails the meticulous patience required. Every detail, from concealing dirt to rehearsing distractions, shows the razor-thin margin between freedom and capture. Leo Genn and Anthony Steele bring understated performances, focusing not on Hollywood heroics, but the claustrophobic grind of inch-by-inch progress. What makes it gripping is the authenticity. The escape really worked. 3 men crawled through that tunnel, slipping past barbed wire to freedom. The film's documentary-like style makes you feel the dirt under fingernails, the stale air in the tunnel, the terror of being one scrape away from discovery. It set the tone for future escape films, proving that you don't need big action to create suspense, just the relentless ticking of time and the ingenuity of desperate men. The fact that it was based on true improvisation makes it one of Britain's most compelling wartime dramas. The password is courage, 1962. If The Wooden Horse was about careful planning, The Password is Courage is about chaotic boldness. This true story follows Sergeant Charles Coward, a British soldier who seemed to treat capture as nothing more than a temporary inconvenience. Every time the Germans locked him up, he found a way out. And when he wasn't escaping, he was sabotaging from the inside. Dirk Bogarde plays Coward with a mischievous grin, turning the film into a blend of comedy and tension. One moment, Coward is bluffing his way past guards with outlandish excuses. The next, he's orchestrating smuggling operations under their noses. While lighter in tone than other war dramas, the film captures a different kind of courage, the refusal to submit, even when the odds are impossible. The real Charles Coward earned the nickname the Count of Auschwitz for aiding prisoners and smuggling intelligence out. The film doesn't delve deeply into that chapter, but emphasizes his spirit of defiance. Audiences loved it because it proved heroism didn't always look grim. It could look cheeky, resourceful, and relentlessly stubborn. It's less polished historically than Odette or Carve Her Name with Pride, but its charm lies in showing that not all victories came from commandos with elaborate plans. Sometimes, one man with quick wit and a refusal to quit could cause as much trouble as an entire regiment. They Who Dare, 1954. Some war stories are about massive battles. Others? They're about a handful of men sneaking across islands with nothing but grit. They Who Dare dramatizes a commando raid in the Dodecanese Islands, where British special forces attempted to sabotage Axis airfields. It doesn't have the fame of D-Day epics, but its sense of isolation makes it one of Britain's grittiest war tales. Dirk Bogarde leads a small team dropped by submarine, tasked with blowing up enemy aircraft before they could be unleashed on Allied shipping. The film plays heavily on suspense, harsh landscapes, unreliable allies, and the nagging feeling that the mission might never succeed. Unlike the polished heroics of other 1952 war films, this one leans into fatigue, fear, and the crushing weight of operating behind enemy lines with limited supplies. It's not flawless, the pacing sometimes drags, but the raw sense of vulnerability is its strength. These weren't super soldiers. They were ordinary commandos, trying to carry out an extraordinary task, and the film captures how thin the line was between daring and disaster. In many ways, They Who Dare serves as a reminder that not every mission ended with medals and cheering. Sometimes, the victory was simply surviving long enough to get home. The Red Beret, 1953. Before James Bond and big Hollywood franchises, there was The Red Beret, a movie that helped introduce British paratroopers and their elite SAS roots to cinema audiences. Starring Alan Ladd, yes, an American in the lead, which stirred some controversy. It tells the story of an outsider who joins Britain's fledgling airborne forces during World War II. While loosely fictionalized, the film was inspired by real SAS and parachute regiment exploits in North Africa and Europe. It portrays training as grueling, camaraderie as essential, and missions as a mix of chaos and luck. Ladd's character, who hides his true past, ends up reflecting the very spirit of those early airborne soldiers, unconventional, untested, but willing to jump into danger. What makes the movie significant is the timing. Released just 8 years after the war, it helped shape public perception of Britain's airborne warriors. Many veterans felt the film captured the rough humor and improvisation of their units, even if it smoothed over some of the darker realities. Critics today might find it dated, but it's an important bridge between real commando missions and their cinematic myth. Without films like The Red Beret, later classics like Where Eagles Dare or The Wild Geese might never have had an audience primed for parachutes, sabotage, and high-risk raids. The One That Got Away, 1957. This entry flips the script. Instead of British commandos pulling off the impossible, The One That Got Away tells the true story of Franz von Vera, a German pilot captured in Britain who became the only Axis prisoner of war to successfully escape and make it back home. Yes, you heard that right, the only one. Hardy Kruger plays Vera with a mix of charm and icy determination. The film chronicles his repeated escape attempts from British camps, each one more audacious than the last. Crawling through mud, disguising himself, bluffing his way past guards, it's like watching a cat toy with fate until it finally pounces. The tension isn't about battlefields, but about mind games. One man against an entire system designed to keep him locked up. The authenticity is striking. The screenplay closely follows documented events, and the result is a movie that feels half thriller, half documentary. What's more, British audiences had to come to terms with the uncomfortable reality that sometimes the other side had individuals just as daring as their own heroes. In the grand library of POW escape films, this one stands apart because it refuses easy patriotism. Instead, it's about persistence, resilience, and the uncomfortable truth that skill and nerve don't wear a national uniform. The Guns of Navarone, 1961. If there's one British war movie that feels larger than life while still rooted in real ops, it's The Guns of Navarone. Based on Alistair MacLean's novel, the film was inspired by commando raids in the Aegean Sea, particularly around Navarino and Leros. The plot? A small Allied team must infiltrate a heavily guarded island and destroy giant coastal guns, threatening a rescue mission. Gregory Peck, David Niven, and Anthony Quinn headline the cast, giving the story blockbuster energy long before the word existed. But what makes it legendary isn't just the stars. It's the balance between grit and spectacle. The film emphasizes how sabotage missions weren't just about explosions, but about deception, climbing sheer cliffs, and navigating a labyrinth of betrayals. The movie dramatizes heavily, yes, but the spirit rings true. Real commando raids often involved impossible odds, dangerous climbs, and operations where one slip meant disaster. Navarone takes that reality and dials it up, creating a suspense epic that still resonates decades later. It won the Academy Award for Best Special Effects and became a global hit, cementing the idea that Britain's wartime commandos weren't just fighters, they were cinematic legends. Even today, its mix of authenticity and flair sets the bar for war adventure films. Force 10 from Navarone, 1978. Sequels are rarely as good as the original, but Force 10 from Navarone deserves credit for pulling off something unique. While the first film was inspired by commando raids in the Aegean, this one shifts to Yugoslavia, where Allied commandos work with partisans to sabotage a bridge critical to Axis supply lines. Starring Robert Shaw, Harrison Ford, and Edward Fox, the movie blends fact with fiction. While no mission unfolded exactly as depicted, the story echoes real sabotage ops carried out by the SOE and SAS in the Balkans. The sense of tension, working alongside locals, never fully sure who can be trusted, captures the very real complexity of Allied missions in Eastern Europe. The film has a looser 1,970 seconds action vibe compared to the tightly wound suspense of The Guns of Navarone. But it still reflects the improvisational chaos that defined special ops. Plans crumbling, loyalties shifting, and survival, depending on quick decisions. Though it didn't match the original success, Force 10 kept alive the cinematic tradition of honoring those smaller, riskier missions. It also marked one of Harrison Ford's first big post-Star Wars roles, ensuring a whole new audience discovered the daring world of Britain's commando legends. Where Eagles Dare, 1968. Alpine castles. Parachute drops in blizzards. Double crosses around every corner. Where Eagles Dare might be fictional, but its DNA is pure British commando daring. Richard Burton and Clint Eastwood lead a team sent to rescue a captured general from an impregnable mountaintop fortress in Bavaria. What makes the film iconic isn't just its twists, It's the atmosphere, the snowy climbs, the cable car fights, the constant suspicion that someone in the group is a traitor. While no operation was this cinematic, the inspiration came from real SOE and SAS alpine raids, where small teams braved mountains to sabotage infrastructure or free prisoners. Alistair MacLean, who also wrote the Guns of Navarone, penned the screenplay. He grounded the thrills in the style of real ops, secrecy, improvisation, and sheer nerve. The result was a blockbuster that combined espionage and commando grit, turning into one of the defining action war movies of the 1960 seconds. Its legacy is huge. From video games to later action films, the template of a small, outnumbered unit storming an impossible fortress owes a debt to Where Eagles Dare. It may be fiction, but it captured the essence of British daring. When the odds say no, go anyway. The sea shall not have them, 1954. Not every daring operation involved sabotage and explosions. Some were about pulling people back from the jaws of the sea. The Sea Shall Not Have Them tells the story of Britain's air-sea rescue service during World War II. Its title comes from a wartime motto, promising that downed airmen would not be abandoned, no matter the risks. The plot focuses on 4 men stranded in a dinghy after their bomber goes down and the desperate rescue mission to save them. It's a slower burn compared to cliff-scaling Commandos, but the tension is just as sharp. Each passing hour brings colder waters, weaker bodies, and the dread that help might not arrive in time. Michael Redgrave and Dirk Bogarde headline the cast, grounding the film in quiet heroism rather than loud spectacle. The authenticity hits home. These kinds of missions really happened, and countless men owed their lives to the persistence of rescue crews who flew into storms and enemy-patrolled seas. It's easy to overlook compared to bigger war dramas, but the movie highlights a forgotten truth. Sometimes the bravest ops weren't about destroying, but about saving. It's war stripped of glamour, showing courage in its purest, most humane form. Operation Crossbow, 1965. By 1943, Britain faced a nightmare. New flying bombs and rockets threatening cities. Operation Crossbow dramatizes the secret Allied missions to sabotage and dismantle the launch sites before they unleashed chaos. It's part thriller, part spy film, with a cast including Sophia Loren, George Peppard, and Trevor Howard. The film weaves fact and fiction, but the stakes were real. Britain's special operations teams and intelligence officers worked to identify hidden sites in France, often under heavy guard. The movie captures the atmosphere of secrecy, agents infiltrating, posing as engineers, bluffing their way inside bunkers, and risking exposure at every step. What makes it memorable is its balance of tension and spectacle. Aerial bombings, underground layers, and the race against time give it blockbuster flair, but it never loses sight of the chilling reality. These rockets were designed to level cities. While not the most precise history lesson, Operation Crossbow serves as a pulse-pounding reminder of the behind-the-scenes battles fought in labs and tunnels as much as on front lines. It shows that Britain's survival often depended on brains and nerve as much as on guns and aircraft. Went the day well? 1942. This one's different. Released during the war itself, Went the Day Well is part propaganda, part chilling what-if story. Set in a quiet English village, the film imagines what would happen if disguised German troops infiltrated and prepared for invasion. The villagers slowly realize what's happening, and a desperate fight for survival begins. Though fictional, the inspiration came from genuine fears of German airborne landings in Britain and from training exercises designed to prepare communities for just such scenarios. It captured the paranoia of the time, that the war could suddenly come crashing into the most ordinary of places. What's fascinating is how dark it gets. Unlike many morale-boosting films of the era, this one doesn't shy away from sacrifice. Ordinary people, farmers, shopkeepers, even children, are forced to act decisively. It's about courage under invasion, not soldiers abroad, and it hit audiences in 1942 like a wake-up call. Today, it stands out as one of the boldest wartime films Britain ever made. It wasn't just entertainment. It was both warning and reassurance that, if the worst happened, ordinary Britons could rise to the moment. The Cockleshell Heroes, 1955. If one film defines the sheer audacity of British commando raids, it's The Cockleshell Heroes. Based on the real Operation Frankton of 1942, it tells the story of Royal Marines who paddled canoes, yes, canoes, into Bordeaux harbor to sabotage enemy ships. It sounds like madness, but it worked, and the mission became legendary. The movie dramatizes the preparation, the grueling river journey, and the constant fear of discovery. Trevor Howard and Jose Ferrer lead the cast, portraying both the discipline and the reckless bravery required. The visuals, men silently paddling under moonlight, drifting past patrols, give the story an almost surreal edge. The cost was high. Of the 12 men who set out, only 2 survived, but their mission succeeded in crippling vital supply lines. The film captures both the triumph and the tragedy, honoring the sacrifice without glossing over the risk. What makes it unforgettable is the sheer scale of nerve involved. No heavy weapons, no backup, just small boats, sheer endurance, and men who refuse to be intimidated by impossible odds. It remains one of Britain's most celebrated tales of special forces ingenuity. From canoes in Bordeaux to castles in Bavaria, these films prove that Britain's wartime daring wasn't just history, it was cinema waiting to happen. Some were grim, some thrilling, and some surprisingly human, but all of them were rooted in the real courage of small groups who punched far above their weight. Which story floored you the most? The moonlit canoe raid, the fearless Odette, or the mountain fortress of Where Eagles Dare? Drop your thoughts below, subscribe for more, and let's keep these daring legends alive.